Good evening, everyone. Oh, let me turn this on. Okay, now you can hear me. And good evening to everybody on Zoom. Good to see you. I want to talk tonight about two things that are unlikely companions. One is the current situation in the country and the world, and the other is Zazen. Both of them, I think, drove us here. And I don't know about you, but I can't not pay attention and wonder how this practice is going to be operationalized on behalf of the current moment. How I'm going to take refuge, and remember to take refuge and explore how refuge can be offered not only to me by my practice, but to others by my practice. And I think that we all share in that intention, actually. I've heard from so many people this week who are in distress, who are directly or indirectly affected by all of the changes that are going on. This is a really profound teaching about impermanence and uncertainty. So often when things are in a more accustomed configuration, we forget about impermanence and uncertainty, except in particular circumstances. But we can go along very calmly, not being too challenged, sometimes very challenged, but not to this extent when the collective is so challenged. And impermanence, uncertainty is so much involved in suffering states, which is the heart that we all want to attend to through our practice and also through how we live our daily life. The thing about impermanence and uncertainty is, and suffering, is it's invariably involved in a sense of before and after, and past and future. And so much of the anxieties that are coming up is, if this is what's happening in the first couple of weeks of a new regime, what's going to happen next week and the month after that and the year after that? So there's a lot of before and after. So tonight, we've all returned to the Sangha and take refuge in practicing together, helping each other reinforce a habit of practice. This is a wholesome habit. We don't want to get rid of this habit. We want to remember to practice, because it's always available. It's always available, whether we're together in Sangha, though tonight I'd like to really emphasize how much being in Sangha supports our practice. But whether we're with Sangha, Buddha Sangha, or whether we're out and about in the great Sangha of all beings, the refuge is available to us when we do regular practice, kind of formal practice in this setting. It's so much more available to us when we need it, out and about. Being grounded in Dharma practice becomes much more important now. And we rely on each other for reminders and good companionship. There's a book that came out now the name of the Chan master who is master at City of 1000 Buddhas in California.
Yeah.
Always talks about good companions. We're all good companions to each other. And Dharma friendship, essential in practice. Learning how to become a good friend. And learning how to have our mind and heart be a good friend rather than a friend who's really going to undermine our sense of well-being through the inner critic operating too much all the time. And Dharma practice really helps us, is grounded in groundlessness, the groundlessness of uncertainty. One of the reasons why uncertainty is so difficult to handle is because there is no ground when we don't know. There's no ground. And I don't know about you, but I sure am experiencing that these days. Not even in a Dharma sense. I mean, we can experience it in a Dharma sense, but it really takes hold in this great collective moment. We really experience the shifting ground, the uncertain ground. What will the next step bring? This is always the question in practice. This is always the question in life, but now it's really obvious. So without beginning or end, no matter how long you practice, there is no end to conditions. And sometimes those conditions are very fine. And hopefully every day has moments like that for each of us. But sometimes conditions are very difficult. And it's so helpful to recognize, oh, these are conditions. And to really appreciate that teaching. And that the world of samsara is the world of conditions. Of grasping and clinging and holding on to what is familiar, what we want, right? What we don't want. It's also really important not to think that Dharma practice is going to make us immune to samsara. But as long as we're human beings, we will experience samsara. We'll experience all of the challenges that human beings have. I'm talking about experience now, So there was there's a little story in one of the books that quotes a lot of different little stories about Suzuki Roshi. And one says, a student asked him once, does a Zen master suffer in a different way than their students suffer? This is a really important thing to get clear about. Suzuki answered, in the same way. If not, I don't think they're good enough. I think it's really important to tell the truth that we are human beings. We're always human beings. Shakyamuni Buddha was a human being who really witnessed, the conditions he grew up in were lovely. He had everything, but he still was dissatisfied and restless when he beheld the extent and the inevitability of suffering in the human world. That was his come on. Is there any way to end the suffering that comes with being a human being? And that's what we're all about. And what does the question mean? Is there any way to end? When we say there's no beginning, there's no beginning or end to suffering. So how do we solve this conundrum? And Dogen Zenji wrote an essay that he titled "The Acupuncture Needle of Zazen." And it's a wonderful essay, and I recommend reading it and pondering it, since it's Dogen and it can take a lot of pondering of his language. But the thing about an acupuncture needle is it's very fine, and it's one little point. And that we can all consider how subtle this practice is. We may think we may want a tool that clobbers suffering, but all we got is a little tiny needle point. And that's our breath. We all have that. And as long as we have suffering, as long as we have a human body, we have breath, which cuts through any set of conditions. And we depend on this breath for our life, as our life. So it's an instrument of compassion. So when we're really, really distressed about what's going on, remember this instrument of compassion is breath, practice of breath. So often when we are given instruction about how to practice, we say one of a couple of things. Follow your breath, whatever that means, or count your breath, which sounds a little tense to me. It always sounded tense to me. I tried counting my breath, I just got more and more tense. But some people find it very helpful because it's very specific. And when your mind is jumping all over the place, something very specific can be really helpful. We're all kind of uniquely organized. Our cognitive patterns, our cognitive styles are different. We don't all organize our experience in exactly the same way. So counting your breath can be very useful. And the way we instruct counting breath is we go, well, put a number on each exhale. So actually what we're saying is follow the breath on number 1. So following the breath is embedded in any practice. 1. So do this with me. Breathe out for 1. Breathe all the way out. And then when it's all the way out, we'll let it flow back in naturally. And just notice if you don't interfere with it. At the end of every exhale, we're not going to make a formal study of this right now, but the formal study of it is to notice a little interstice between the end of the exhale and the beginning of the inhale. And if that practice interests you, then that can be useful, because it really brings the attention way into the breath. The Venerable Silananda said, when you keep your mind on the breath, you see nothing else but breath. There's only breath. No person, no being, no woman, no man, no individual, no I, no soul, nothing pertaining to the soul, and so on. There's only breath, but no one who's regulating the breathing or who's giving orders to the breath, who creates the breath, just the breath. So that's he said it, so it must be true. We don't want to interfere. We don't want to make it, it's not a breathing exercise. It's awareness, it's to help, the breath helps us live and also helps us become very concentrated in the present experience. And when that's true, nothing else is going on. So we really are freed. We're free from conditions, from any conditions that are causing suffering. We're free in our experience. We're experiencing freedom in the breath. So breathing out all the way. And then that in-breath is just so lovely. It's just so freely given, so freely received. So there is no immunization against conditions. And I just want to say something that I came across in the American Heritage Dictionary, it's such a great dictionary. I looked up the term coup d'etat. Just to take a breath from a break from this calming breathing. I'm going to bring up the coup d'etat. And you know what its description is? A sudden stroke of state policy involving deliberate violation of constitutional forms by a group of persons in authority. I couldn't believe it. This has happened many times all over the world and here, but never quite so forefront, because we've never had the kind of media that lets us know about the suffering in every corner of the world. So we've got this breath practice. And we can bring it to, first of all, grief, personal grief, the kind of grief we feel when somebody we love dies. Oh, sorry. And some sense of hope dies or is really challenged, whatever it is. I know I feel profound grief right now. Grief that I'm not more able to make a difference in what happens, except through this practice, which is like an acupuncture needle in the flesh of the world. There are many systems running through that. So we allow ourselves in Zazen, when we sit in Zazen, whatever comes up, whatever feeling tone, whatever emotional, whatever narrative, whatever impulse, we are able to be aware of it. And aware of any habit of trying to interfere with it, to block the experience. It's very important not to block our experience. Because when we allow ourselves to really be present with what happens, then it changes. We're informed by it. It deepens our understanding and usually compassion. Compassion arises, and so it turns into something that we can offer in all kinds of ways. That's our ground for how to be a human being, is to be able to offer the wisdom that comes from really knowing how it feels to be a human being in any state. All living beings feel trouble and affliction. So we bring the breath also to fear. And there's wisdom in this. There's wisdom in being aware of, first of all, there's wisdom in fear. It's a basic animal warning system to pay attention. It's not something to do away with, but it's something to come into measured response to be informed by, so that it can be useful rather than just debilitating and harmful. It's one of the tools of totalitarianism, this fear. So being able to know when we're really afraid and to maintain the sense of agency. This is fear. This is fear. And we're not so fooled. We're not so fooled by what is being put forward to us. So the most I can come up with to say about fear and being aware of fear is that it's not so helpful just to be gripped by it and not be informed by it. Know its nature. It's like knowing the nature of anger. Very important to know when you're angry, to feel or maybe rage, to feel the energy in that, saying something is not okay here. What is it? What is it that's being violated? What is the thing that's most important that's being violated here by myself or by others, so that we don't lose track? That's a blessing, not to lose track of what's most important. So where we turn for relief, for refuge, to bring balance to our minds and hearts, and steadiness in our ability to respond wisely, not out of, reflexive reactivity, which is just so not helpful. But, I do it. Sometimes I think what I do. And then we just be kind to ourselves and think about what are the conditions that I wasn't paying attention to, so that I finally acted out, kind of my feeling of helplessness by trying to summon some kind of power that turns into something destructive. So what do we rely on for steadiness and for relief? And there's only one way to turn, which is right back into the present moment. All the Buddhas say that. So it must be true. But try it out for yourself to see if that's true. If turning back to the present moment and the breath actually really is refuge. It brings immediate relief. There's so much to the breath. In the breath itself, there's no yesterday, no tomorrow, no today. That's in one of our chants. No yesterday, no, not even today, just breath. Only the wind in the pipes. So I was at a talk once by Shodo Harada Roshi, who is about this tall. He's very short. His presence is enormous. His energy is enormous. And he talked about the breath, and he said, we're just a hollow tube. When you're doing Zazen, let the breath just flow, stream down the tube. And he practiced that so fully that I think everybody was doing the same thing. And it's very helpful to think of that image sometimes If you're really trying to take hold of the breath, hollow tube all the way. And then it just comes up naturally back. The other one thing that is noticeable when you do following the breath, which I think of as Zazen. I mean, what else is there to do when you're just sitting there and breathing? You pay attention to the body and the breath. Each breath is unique. So not only is this exhale the only one that's happening, and this inhale is the only one that's happening, but you may notice that each one is not the same as the one before. Or you may not notice that, but the fact is it's only this breath, only this one. But what else happens during breath practice? What presents itself in the midst of breathing? Ever have a thought come up? An impulse, a judgment, a sensation, a plan, emotion, whatever. It's amazing. So if you're really paying attention, I mean, occasionally there's a long period of time where just the breath is absolutely all that's needed. There's nothing else. The absorption is just all there is. But much more often than that, there's a lot of other things going on when we're practicing breath. We may have one breath where we're really present. We may have two or three, or we may, come back to it periodically. We go off into thought, come back. Go off into thought, come back. Oh, I just remembered. Oh, I come back. It's a constant returning. So whatever is going on during a period of Zazen is during the very breaths, because the breath doesn't stop when you have a thought. So that's the nature of the experience of breath. Can you be aware of breath and think at the same time? That's something to look at. And the other thing is thoughts that are summoned. Let's say you're sitting there and you're very bored. It's like, oh, no. Oh, this is so boring. Maybe I'll think about, and then you bring up your favorite thing to worry about, to remember with sweetness, to, whatever. You just summon it, and then you follow it. But much more often what happens is you have the intention to sit and breathe, and you constantly think, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, and you can't remember what you're supposed to be doing when you're sitting there. So that's another thing that fills the screen. What other things mark the breath? So that's another the time of the breath. Oh yeah, I like this line that I wrote. The breath steps back and the mind rears up. Yeah, that happens. It's like a guest at a cocktail party just entering the door and like, oh, look at them, and then you start following them. So another way to look at this is that our attention gets really focused on breath, but then it begins to leak. And attention leaks out in a lot of different ways. So, notice your leaks. What other words could you come up with to describe that? So, coming back to what I said earlier, which is the importance of regular practice and the help that we get when we sit with others, and it can just be, your next door neighbor or a friend or one of us outside of the Zen Center, or come to the Zen Center regularly. It really helps to strengthen the habit of remembering. Recollection is one of the marks of right recollection. The
Eightfold path.
it's not the Eightfold Path. Well, anyway, it's one of the numbered things that we want. Yeah, recollection, recalling the practice, recalling the breath, coming back. The more we do it here, the more likely we are going to remember when we're in the midst, to rely on the breath to help bring some ballast to the mind, to hold us right here, to feel the feet and the earth, and remember that these are conditions. They're difficult. They're uncertain, and they're not eternal. And the thing about what I want to finish with is just to remember that when we are together in the Zen Center or any center of practice, or any time we're practicing, we are supported by the ancestors, the benefactors. We're supported by all the other people at the same time who are meditating, and that's not just right here, that's all around the world. There's a lot of meditating going on right now. We're not alone. We are not alone. We're meditating with the Sangha of all beings. The birds that sit at the very top of a tree and breathe. Have you noticed them? They just sit there, all sharing this breath, all breathing together in this one current of energy that is all of life. So that's what our practice of breath, our practice of Dharma, our commitment to staying awake, lends to all of us. We just need to turn in its direction and remember. So I hope that this talk confirms your own determination to really practice well and together with all beings.
Great Bodhisattva vows to become each 5 of the temple.